Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy if he'll make a statement on the steps taken to ensure that 555 sub-postmasters group are fairly compensated?
Well, not to Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I fully take your apology, your words on board, and I humbly apologise. And can I thank the right honourable member for his question. It's really important that we do discuss this. Over recent weeks, we have come repeatedly in this place to the subject of the Post Office Horizon scandal. Members on all sides are rightly united in outrage at what sub-postmasters experienced and the way in which they've been suffered as a consequence. Now, some people's lives have been quite unjustly devastated, losing their roles as postmasters, often their other businesses as well. Some were imprisoned, more faced the shadow of convictions over their working and personal lives. Saddest of all, some did not live to see justice, including some who took their own lives. Now, the Post Office has already apologised, but we know that's not enough. The victims rightly want the truth to be known and those responsible to be held accountable, and that's why we asked Sir Win Williams to hold his inquiry, which has lately heard so much tragic testimony from those affected. As well as apologies and accountability, people want proper compensation to be paid. Those people who exposed the scandal in the first place, the postmasters who won the court case against the Post Office, have not been fairly compensated. But those who were not convicted were not entitled to receive historic shortfall scheme compensations themselves, which paradoxically could leave those postmasters eligible for receiving the HSS better compensated than those who won the court case. Now, the government recognises this just is not right, which is why the Chancellor announced today that we're making funds available to ensure those in the GLO group are not financially disadvantaged by the decision to litigate against the Post Office. The GLO group will now be able to access the same levels of compensation as their non-GLO peers. The postmasters' legal case was funded by litigation funders Therium. Now, our worry in government has always been that any compensation we bring forward for this group of postmasters would not be fully passed on, as Therium has a right to claim a proportion of any compensation received. However, following extensive negotiations with the company, I'm really pleased that Therium have agreed to waive their rights to any claim on this compensation, meaning that we can now proceed. We envisage that the funding will support payments under a new scheme similar to the HSS to compensate those GLO members who were not convicted. Those who have convictions overturned already have access to compensation, and we want this compensation to be paid as promptly as possible. So we're going to be writing to the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance to consult them about the scheme's operations, and I'm meeting representatives of the JFSA on the 30th of March to discuss these proposals. We'll set target dates for compensation awards in the light of our discussions with them. It won't be a long and formal consultation, Mr. Speaker. It will aid decisions on the approach, and I will then, of course, inform the House of our plans to deliver that just compensation which these people so richly deserve.
Kevin Jones.
Can I thank the Minister for his statement and also congratulate him, because he has actually moved this on further than the pathetic attempts or ignorance that was shown by his predecessors. But can I ask, in terms of the Treasury statement this morning says that the 555 will be fully and fairly compensated. There was similar issues raised by the Prime Minister, and I think the Minister said that before the Select Committee. So could he just outline what that means in practice? Is it just reimbursing the legal costs? So we're going to have a more sophisticated scheme, because certainly a lot of constituents like mine, like Tom Brown, who paid about £84,000 he didn't need to, is £84,000 out of pocket. He needs that. The other thing I'd be interested to know is about interim payments, because the sad fact, Mr. Speaker, is there are people in abject poverty now who are living from week to week. So the quicker we can get some interim payments to those people, the better. And in terms of the overall historic shortfall scheme, has he actually got any idea of how many people were affected by it? Because I would actually also like to reopen that, because the window that was given by the Post was very short, and I think he needs to look at that in detail. The other question I would like to ask him is about those who have died. He points to the fact that some have tragically taken their lives, but there are many others who have died. And I wonder whether the scheme will actually involve their estates, because it would be a complete injustice if those families didn't get any of that. And finally, can I just say, in terms of the actual administration of the scheme, can I urge him to take it out of the hands of the Post Office? The 555, I know the member for Leicestershire North West and others have no faith at all in the Post Office in terms of administrating this, so it's important that it seemed to be independent from them. And he talks about the 555. I am quite happy to meet with the Minister, I'm sure with the member for North West Leicestershire and Laura Buthnott, to talk about the details of the scheme. But can I just reiterate a point that I've made before? We've got to get this right now. It is a step forward, I accept that. But it will not go away, Minister. He knows that. Can he just tell the Treasury that? No matter how much it's going to cost, because this is going to cost quite a lot of money. And I don't know whether yet he's actually established how much. Has he got an open chequebook now from the Treasury? Because he might need it.
Can I first of all once again thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for North West Durham for the work that he's done, and indeed to bring this to the House today, because it's so important that we continue to press on and get this done. So his attention to this is really welcomed by myself. And can I thank Lord Arbuthnot, which he mentioned, who's helped to unlock in the last couple of weeks the situation that we've got today. He asked, first of all, how the process is going to work, how quickly the 555 are going to get their money, and that's very much the conversation I want to have with Alan Bates and the JFSA over the next couple of weeks to make sure that we can really get something that they feel confident with. And as I said, I envisage it being something alongside the HSS scheme, similar to the HSS scheme, which actually starts on the basis of looking at losses and ongoing losses as well. So it's important that we do address that in that full and fair way that I've described, make that meaningful. In terms of estates, yes, absolutely. Again, the HSS actually does work with the estates of those who have died, and indeed with those maybe bankrupt with their creditors as well, to make sure that we can restore them into a far better position. But I'll happily meet with the Right Honourable Gentleman and indeed colleagues across the House who have campaigned on this for so many years. But I think we're finally in a position now that Treasury have. I'd love to say I've got a blank cheque from the Treasury, but that's clearly not going to happen from this place. But look, I think the Treasury know that we need to sort it out. I want to make sure that the scheme has the confidence of the JFSA. The HSS, I would say, though, has an independent panel with it. It does have a degree of independence specifically to give people confidence, but we'll work on that in the weeks to come.
Bridge.
I welcome the announcement that the 555 sub-postmasters will now, including my constituents, will now at long last get the compensation they deserve. But does the Minister agree with me that it's very important that the public inquiry currently running gets to the truth as to why the Post Office decided to defend the action of the 555 for over 4 years at huge cost to the public purse, when, following the investigation by Second Sight and Ron Warmington, the evidence from the Fujitsu whistleblower, back in 2015, I knew, the Right Honourable Member for Durham North knew, and more importantly, Minister, the Post Office knew that the Horizon system was faulty and that the convictions of the sub-postmasters were completely unsafe.
Can I thank my honourable friend for all of the work he's done to expose this? And indeed, that's why the statutory inquiry, the independent inquiry led by Sir Wyn Williams, has been listening to testimony from those so badly affected. The next stage of his inquiry is exactly to get to the bottom of those cases that he talks about, who knew what when, with the Post Office, with Fujitsu and departments across government. We will get to the bottom of this.
Miriam Fellows, SNP spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Horizon scandal has spanned decades under Labour, Lib Dem and Tory ministers. It's a stain on the Post Office and its single shareholder, the Government. This response proves that the Government does the right thing in the end, once they have done everything else. But can I congratulate the Minister for his work? He has been true to his word, and in all the ministers that went before him, we never had that. And I do want to real praise to him. The Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance, they took on the Post Office and thereby shone a light. They have to be commended and properly, fully compensated for everything they have done. Many parliamentarians have already mentioned some, and many on the current APPG, of which I have the honour of being chair. We need to see a firm commitment tomorrow in the spring statement for the full compensation that's been promised by the Minister, and reassurance that there will be no impact on the post office network as a result.
Thank the honourable member for all the work that she does with the APBG, not just about righting this wrong, but about the future as well. Can I thank her for her kind words? And this is a moment in time. This is a moment in time I hope we can all be really pleased with, that we're moving this on, but it is only a moment in time. It's not finished. There's a lot, process to go. I will only be judged on this when I know that the 555 and other members have had that full and final compensation. I accept that and I agree with that. The Post Office, we clearly know that I want that money to go into the pockets of the postmasters. I want to minimise legal fees. Clearly the Post Office do not have the resources to pay that level of compensation and not affect the future network, which is why it's been separated. So the Post Office has the future that we all want it to have.
Lucy Allen.
Speaker, and can I thank the Minister from the bottom of my heart for everything that he has done. I am extremely grateful. Does he agree with me that the conduct of the group litigation by the Post Office was shameful, that it was a war of attrition trying to grind down these people who wanted to seek justice, and that it was intentionally trying to stop it coming to light? And thanks to the 555, this is now impossible to ignore. Does he join me in thanking the 555 for their tenacity and determination, and will he also ensure the Post Office apologise for putting them through what they put them through?
My honourable friend, for all the work that she's done on behalf of Tracy and on behalf of the 554 other postmasters as well, her constituent Tracy Felsted. And indeed, look, I won't comment on the Post Office purely and simply because, having instigated the independent inquiry, I want it to remain independent. I don't want to be putting undue pressure on, but clearly the Post Office have apologised. I suspect it will not be the last time that they do so, and we absolutely want to get their answers for them. Can I, by the way, when we're sending out thanks, can I also thank Nick Wallace, who's done an amazing work in setting out the story. It's his life's work of journalism, in setting out the story of the 5-5 and telling them their story.
Shadow Minister Chilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank my right honourable friend, the member for North Durham, for securing this urgent question and for his tireless efforts standing up for all those affected by the Horizon scandal. And I also want to pay tribute to all postmasters who fought for justice, especially to the efforts and determination of the 555 litigants whose civil case paved the way for convictions to be squashed and compensation finally being delivered. Labour has consistently called for all those affected by the Horizon scandal to be able to access the compensation they deserve. It was simply unacceptable that those who led this slow march to justice had been excluded from the historic shortfall scheme. And in a week in which we have had plenty of warm words from the government on their commitment to British workers, but little by way of action, it is vital that the government gets this right. Hard-working, honest people had their lives torn apart because of a misguided belief that workers are dishonest and technology infallible. Mr. Speaker, today's announcement is very warmly welcomed on these benches, and I want to thank the Minister for his work on this area. His commitment to this issue has been unquestionable throughout. However, I do want to press the Minister that speed is now vital. The government has delayed far too long to get to this point, and there could be no further delays for all those affected to get the compensation that will go some way to making amends for this appalling injustice. As such, can he say how many are affected, and can he provide a timescale for when all compensation payments will have been made? Labour has called for all those involved to be held accountable, so can he update the House on what investigations are ongoing into the role of Fujitsu? And will he commit to regularly updating the House on the progress of the scheme? Mr. Speaker, this has been one of the greatest miscarriages of justice this country has ever seen. Every day delayed only compounds that injustice. I hope the government can finally start to right these wrongs for good.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope I can show by my actions that absolutely I will keep the House updated as we go along in this. In terms of the compensation, in terms of the compensation and where we are at the moment, I can announce that as of 11th of March, 45% of people in the historic shortfall scheme have already received offers. That amounts to 1,067 individuals. Post Office report that they're firmly on track to make 95% of initial offers by the end of the year. I want to make sure that, that as the historic shortfall scheme started slowly, as they started to work through the cases and benchmark the cases, which will help inform future payments, then actually we know so much more about the 555, and dovetailed with the HSS information that we've gained, I think we can be able to start delivering that compensation very, very quickly. So I'm still aiming for the end of the year for the HSS. We need to re-establish, once we know what the process is, exactly a timescale agreed with the JFSA.
And we'll hear it first in the Chamber, and we'll make sure it's done via a statement rather than me granting new cues. Lovely Minister. Andrew Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome what my honourable friend has said today, and there's no doubt that he has been part of the resolution of this problem. But he will know that across the House, for many, many months now, everyone has accepted that this is a huge miscarriage of justice and indeed a disgrace. I know that there is an independent inquiry, which he has rightly referenced today, but will he ensure that within government there is a lessons learned process, lessons for the future, so that the role of government too is placed under the microscope to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again?
Thank my honourable friends. And first of all, when talking about the independent inquiry, can I just answer the question about Fujitsu? Fujitsu, they're not on the preferred list of government suppliers, but they can obviously tender for government for government contracts. And indeed, when we hear from the independent inquiry, that will give us all the information we need as to how we move our relationship going forward. But look, talking to my right honourable friend's point, absolutely, we always want to learn lessons, not only just in how what happened before in this scandal, but how we've handled it recently as well. I think COVID has taught us how to accelerate decision making, which is what's given me some of the weaponry I've needed to get to this point quicker than we might otherwise have done in normal times. But there's plenty of lessons that we will be learning in government.
Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I begin by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Durham North, and indeed the honourable gentleman, the member for North West Leicestershire, for the work they've done throughout this scandalous issue. And to the Minister as well, actually. It's rare for me to congratulate ministers, but I think he has ploughed through real barriers in Whitehall to get where we are today. But what people are asking me is this: what are we doing to get some money back from Fujitsu? Because it's going to cost the taxpayer potentially hundreds of millions of pounds. How on earth are we going to allow Fujitsu to get away with this?
Can I thank the honourable gentleman not only for his kind words, but for the work that he has done for not only just representing members of the GLO in the first place, but his work here as well and his determination. The frank answer is we won't. We will push as much as we can in every avenue to tackle compensation for wherever it comes from. It shouldn't be the UK taxpayer that's picking up the tab for other people's problems.
Mr. Speaker, this scandal continues to shock, and I thank the campaigners and the members in this House with greyer hair than me who have perhaps had their grey hair caused by this horrendous situation. But listen, I echo the calls for interim payments and more information about the practical steps to manage expectations. But it's understandable that victims, like my constituent Nicola Arch, want to see the details. And they're also looking to see if things like malicious prosecution is included. And I wondered whether, for those found not guilty, the Minister can provide some comfort from the dispatch box today.
Can I thank the work my honourable friend has done with representing Nicola Arch and the others. I saw her on GB News the other day talking with Nicola on the constituency casebook section, where they both spoke really, really excellently on this. Yes, I can confirm that our intention is very much to allow people who were prosecuted but not convicted full access in the same way with the as members of the HSS. We've got to work through that detail, but I have confidence that we'll get there.
Thank you, and I want to also add my thanks to the Minister for his tenacity in pushing this through some of the barriers that we've faced over a long period of time, and also to my right honourable friend, the Member for North Durham, and the honourable gentleman, the Member for North West Leicestershire, for sticking with this for such a long time. It's great that we're now getting a clearer picture of the compensation. I do support what my right honourable friend has said about interim payments being key, because there is real hardship in this injustice. But can I ask him about the 736 who have been wrongly convicted of misdoing? Only 72 of them have had their convictions quashed, overturned. So what is the government doing to ensure justice for all sub-postmasters?
So in terms of interim payments, we obviously, anybody that was convicted can apply for interim payments, the majority of which have had their payments done now, and 555 will be able to have that should they have been convicted. But in terms of those other people, we are clearly working with Post Office to make sure that we can get to those remaining people to apply for their appeals to be overturned. Clearly, we don't want anybody to have a conviction on their record that should not be there through no fault of their own, and we will make sure that we continue to push for that.
Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I remember my first ever job was working on the Post Office counter-automation project some 40 years ago. I hasten to say it was for Burroughs machines and not Fujitsu. I congratulate my honourable friend on the work that he's done thus far. But clearly there is a case of compensating people quickly. He's going to do a short consultation. Will he consider now, after that consultation, making interim payments immediately rather than waiting to the end of the year?
Minister.
Well, first of all, I don't want to preempt anything that we might do, but when I talk about short consultation, this is 555 people that have got a really well-organised group together and their lawyers, and we've already started that process. So this isn't something just writing out and waiting for answers to come back. This is a really focused bit of work. What I can say is that we will start the process that is agreed with the JFSA as soon as possible, and as soon, Mr. Speaker, as I've updated the House first.
Peter Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister will be aware of the plight of my constituent Myra, who with her mum jointly ran a post office. They begged and borrowed £70,000 from friends and family to fill a shortfall that they couldn't understand, which we now know, and which the post office probably knew at the time, was not a shortfall at all. They lost their job, lost their home, were branded as thieves and liars. Myra's mum didn't live to see her name cleared. Myra was not allowed to claim under the historic shortfall scheme. Will the Minister agree that no matter how carefully the criteria for any compensation scheme are drawn, there will always be people who don't fit those criteria? And will he ensure that there is a catch-all clause in that compensation scheme so that nobody is left without the compensation for which they have waited far too long?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and clearly, please send my condolences to Myra and their family. But within any scheme, there's always going to be hard edges. But I want to make sure that if there are particular people falling through the gaps, please do let me know. Let me see what we can do further to support them through this difficult time.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I add my tributes to the Minister, who has been in a long line of ministers who previously haven't grasped this issue, but he certainly has. For the sake of clarity from other points made, could I just seek clarity on those who have died? Will their estates benefit?
Minister.
Yeah, in the same way with HSS, that we can work through the estates to make sure there's compensation through them. That's my understanding.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate my honourable friend from North Durham for securing this UQ, and also want to congratulate the Minister. He's really stuck at this, and he's been candid with us on every occasion, so I do congratulate him. But this is one of many battles, and it's won, and I congratulate him. But the purpose of compensation is to put people in the position that they would have been had the insult not occurred in the first place. So it's absolutely essential that this scheme properly compensates people for their past pecuniary losses and their future pecuniary losses, as well as compensating for their pain and their suffering and loss of amenity, to include the loss of liberty. So will he ensure that those principles are adhered to in this scheme? Because nothing less than that is going to satisfy people who have been so badly wronged by this terrible episode.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his kind words. And yeah, look, in terms of loss of liberty, that comes up with the overturned convictions. But in terms of their overall losses, as I said, the way the HSS working is looking at their past losses as well as what is ongoing, and then making an assessment of that with an independent panel behind it. I envisage that to be the same scheme for those 555, so they're on parity in terms of their compensation.
Jerome Mayo.
As backbenchers, we often ask for action from ministers and get absolutely nowhere, but today is different. And I want to join the tributes to the minister and how hard he's been working, how successfully he's been working in government to get to a solution here. I also want to put on record recognition of the decision by Therium not to seek their extra compensation. This week, above all weeks, it's nice to have a business that's doing the right thing. But can my honourable friend give some indication to my constituents and many others of the time frame, the rough time frame between now and receipt of the compensation payment?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his kind words. And look, it's difficult for me to say because it depends on what the scheme is that we come up with. If it's the scheme that I'm envisaging, similar to the HSS running alongside that, then I'm expecting those payments to be largely out the door in people's pockets by the end of the year. By adding the 555 to that, I don't see there being a long time delay because we know so much about those 555 to include them in that scheme or something similar.
Kate Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my honourable friend, the member for North Durham, and also the Minister for his work in this area. But I actually want to pay tribute to the 555 in their long battle to get justice and compensation and what has been one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in our history. Particularly, I want to pay tribute to my constituent Chris Head, one of the 555 and a tireless campaigner on this issue. And I know that Chris would like me to ask the Minister today if the scheme will have independent oversight so that victims are fairly and independently assessed.
Minister.
Can I thank the honourable lady, and can I also pay tribute to Christopher Head as well? He was one of the youngest postmasters involved in this, and we often have some Twitter ding-dong, shall we say, but which has mellowed slightly since we've all got to the same sort of point. But she asks about independent oversight. Look, the historic shortfall scheme itself has independent oversight with an independent panel, but nonetheless, as I say, the scheme that we come up with, I want to make sure that the JFSA are as comfortable with this as they can be, because we want to give them the confidence that there is indeed independent oversight on that so they can get full and fair compensation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join in welcoming this announcement and the tenacity my honourable friend has shown in addressing this injustice. But will the government look to recover these compensation costs from those responsible for the scandal, the providers of the Horizon system, and also look to recover bonuses paid to those who are running the Post Office during this shameful period?
Minister.
I thank the honourable friend, and look, nothing's off the table. I think we need to look at all of these sort of things because the UK taxpayer should not be on the hook for other people's mistakes and indeed sometimes deliberate, often deliberate approach in this regard.
Sir Tony Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I also add my thanks and welcome to the Minister's statement today? The reality is that sub-postmasters have lost enormously, and compensation of itself will go so far. One of the things that they do want, though, is to know that there is genuine accountability. I know the Minister doesn't want to anticipate the inquiry, but can he make it quite clear that where there is individual wrongdoing in this, that wrongdoing will be properly dealt with at whatever level is appropriate?
Minister.
Thank the honourable gentleman. Absolutely, I can make clear that. You know, we want to know those answers, but people, yes, they want compensation, full and fair compensation, but they want answers and they want accountability. You can only have accountability if you do exactly what the honourable gentleman said.
Very Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, I congratulate the Minister. There's light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of people now, but my honourable friend from North Durham has played a blinder. But this is another example of where all-party, cross-party backbenchers in this House really worked hard for their constituents and have made a difference. Can I briefly, though, mention the Criminal Case Review Commission? Very small staff have worked really hard on this, and Helen Pitcher, the Chief Executive, and her team have done a solid amount of work as well. Could we recognise that, and could he give Helen and her team some help, because they desperately need to retain some commissioners to finish this work?
Gentleman, and indeed, can I pay tribute to the CCRC? And indeed, actually, it's because of their resource that we want to make sure that people can actually go direct to the Court of Appeal to try and circumvent overloading the CCRC. But I do pay tribute to the work that they've done to get us this far.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first of all commend the Right Honourable Member for North Durham for his endeavours to make this for his tenacity, and also to the Minister very much for delivery. It's always good to have a Minister who does that. Thank you. Whilst I welcome the news that payments are to be equalised, this is the second time in 2 days that I've come across cases whereby those who pay litigation and go through the stress of court cases end up worse off than those who did nothing. So, Minister, could consideration be given to the court costs being covered as an act of good faith for those postmasters whose lives and reputations have been decimated?
Minister.
The Honourable Gentleman. And indeed, the court cases, in terms of the original funding, will be absolutely taken into account. That's the entire process. They will be compensated as if they were going through the HSS, as if they hadn't have gone through that court case in the first place and had those court fees and legal fees taken away from them. I totally agree with them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Government's move to ensure that the 555 sub-postmasters receive the compensation that they deserve, and I want to thank the Minister for his work to fix this. He has really cared about this matter. Can he confirm what discussions he's had with his Cabinet colleagues about how we can ensure future victims of scandals like this one do not face the same issues in accessing compensation swallowed up by legal fees?
Mr. Speaker, I think this is the last question. So, can I just say that it's 3/4 of an hour of a moment in the sun for me, but this isn't about me. This is about those 555. And thank you so much to everybody across this House who's been involved in making sure we can get to this point. There's plenty more to do. But clearly, we will all learn from this situation to inform us of other situations that may arise to make sure that people get compensation as soon as possible.
Right. A point of order. Stuart MacDonald.
I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, this afternoon we are going to go on to consider Lord's amendment to the Nationality and Borders Bill.